Speaking to a camera is not like speaking to a crowd. You want to maximize the way you connect to people online? Stick around and find out 5 different ways how speaking online is totally different than speaking in person. The first big difference between speaking online and speaking to a live audience is speaking online, you have only 8 seconds to capture people's attention. Now, when they're in a room, you've got basically a captive audience. There's enough social pressure and understanding and even sense of being polite that nobody's going to be walking out of the room in the first 15 seconds because you didn't immediately capture their attention. But it's totally different online. There is no peer pressure, and people's mindset is a lot more like channel surfing than going to a concert. You have 8 seconds to convince people that you have something important for them to hear, that what you're going to say is going to be interesting and you're not going to bore them. Far too often we waste those critical seconds doing some kind of a welcome, hello, how are you doing here? Or recapping what we did last week. Well, last week we were in the 3rd chapter of Second Hesitations. This week, they're already gone. Now, you've been in this long enough, you've probably noticed that you have lots and lots of views in the first minute of your video and it drops off dramatically. That's because we're losing them right at the beginning. Don't waste your time with a logo. Don't waste your time with a welcome. Those first 8 seconds convince people why they need to spend time listening to you. The second thing that's totally different online than it is in person is that they are going to click away to do something else as soon as you confuse them or as soon as you bore them. Again, this doesn't happen live and in church. Like you go off on a strange kind of tangent or you ramble a little bit or they don't quite understand what you're saying. It's very unlikely someone's just going to stand up in the middle of the service and say, I don't know what this guy's talking about. I got something better to do. That doesn't happen live, but it does happen online. They will click away as soon as you confuse them, as soon as you bore them. So if you start rambling, things aren't really clear in your head what you're trying to say, you start meandering around, they're gone. Or if you say something that they don't understand. Now this is typical, you throw in a theological term without explaining it. You just sort of drop substitutionary atonement on them, assuming everybody knows that, they're gone. Same thing is if you introduce a Bible character or Bible story, just even a passing reference. Oh yeah, remember that time when Abram changed his name to Abraham? No, they don't. And as soon as you start talking about people they don't know, they're gone. If you're going to introduce a Bible character, if you're going to introduce a Bible story, give a little snapshot of a background. As soon as you're confusing, as soon as they don't know what you're talking about, they've gone. This is why we've seen any church, even very small churches, will have hundreds of views initially, but they drop off to just a couple dozen as you keep going. You lose a massive amount of audience as soon as you do that. So how do we fix that? Well, the first thing to do is really, really prepare your message. Know what you're going to say and know who you're going to talk to. The third thing is that people's attention spans are shorter online than they are in person. First of all, people don't book an hour and a half or whatever out of their time to watch you online. Maybe they're just in between a couple of different things or they're just momentarily bored. They're not taking a big chunk out of their day just for you. So they've probably got something else going on. Also, in church, they generally have fewer distractions. But online, anything could be going on in the house, anything would be going on online. They might be getting emails, they might be getting text messages, anything can be happening. Even, quite frankly, they just might have multiple tabs open and interested in a whole bunch of different things. Their attention spans are shorter. So even TED Talks, which are geared for a more intellectual audience, people who are at least university educated, even a TED Talk will limit itself to about 17 minutes. There's a reason for that. People's attention span online is shorter than it is in person. So if you're accustomed to 30, 40, 50-minute sermons, that's not going to work online. Online, you have to respect that people's attention span are short. Number 4, far more non-Christians are going to be watching you online than would be watching you in person. When we're having a live service, typically only 1 out of every 25 people is a first-time visitor. And only half of those first-time visitors are actually non-Christians. So that's 1 out of every 50. Now that's still a significant number. That means over the course of a year, you will have approximately your average attendance in first-time visitors who are non-Christians over the course of the year. So if your average attendance is 100, you will have 100 non-Christians visiting your church during the next 12 months. If your attendance is 50, you will have 50 non-Christian first-time visitors attending your church over the next 12 months. That's typical. But online, that can easily be reversed. Even a very small church has the potential of reaching hundreds or even thousands of views. Your community, who maybe would be too intimidated or just not take enough time out of their schedule to actually come in on a Sunday morning, might be checking you out online. Now you might say, oh yeah, well, we had hundreds of views, but if you only look at the views that lasted more than 3 minutes, then we had much fewer. Well, I'm sure you did have much fewer. There might be a good reason why hundreds of people were initially attracted to you, but then dropped out within 3 minutes. If you recognize that online you have the eyes and ears of your whole community, you have to ask yourself some very simple questions. One, am I even talking to my community? Or is this just sort of an inside social club, members only, religious country club? Because they will pick that up easily in the first 3 minutes. Or are you actually expecting them to be in the room? When you're talking to everybody, which includes your community, are you talking in a way that they can understand what you're saying? Or are you using so much Christianese gobbledygook that they can't even figure out what you're trying to get across? Are you aware what's even keeping your community up at night? Are you talking about issues that are relevant to them? Jesus did a very good job of this. Are you? And finally, number 5, the camera is much closer than the pulpit. I don't know if you've ever noticed the difference between theater actors and movie actors, but theater actors have a hard time making a transition to movies because a theater actor is trained to communicate to people who are 50 feet away from them. They use big gestures, big facial expressions, big joy, big sadness, in order for people to read their expressions when they're far away. When they transition to movies, the camera is just right there, but they're still using these big exaggerated movements, and it comes across weird. Well, the exact same thing happens to us. As pastors, we've been trained, we've become accustomed to communicating to people who are 25 or 50 feet away from us. And so we often use big gestures. We use exaggerated voices. Sometimes we'll ride the roller coaster and we'll start off really quiet, and then we'll start building up and building up and building up and shouting and then coming down the roller coaster again. Maybe we'll use pastor's voice. Brothers and sisters, we are gathered here today. Okay, we're accustomed to a much more theatric presentation when we communicate in public to people who are very far away from us physically. When we try doing that to a camera who's 5 feet away, it just comes across as weird.
Listen to me. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He hasn't changed. He hasn't failed. His power is the same. His healing is the same. His deliverance is the same. Glory, 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 glory. Hallelujah.
What we need to realize is when the camera's 5 feet away, it's just like talking to somebody who's in a coffee shop. So use the same gestures you would use in person in a coffee shop. Use the same levels of voice you would use in a coffee shop. If you're not going to shout at someone in a coffee shop, probably shouldn't be shouting to them online. Think much more conversationally when you're shooting your videos for an online audience. Finally, God has given you this massive platform to reach your community. Are you using it wisely? Or are you taking that talent and burying it into the ground? Now is the time to reinvent your church, to transform your church into an army of missionaries to reach your community with the gospel. Hey, if this video made sense to you, if this is helpful, make sure you like and subscribe, and check out our other videos that we have in the same series to help you get better online.